Hello, digital photo students. I'm going to run you through some techniques to turn some of your landscape portraits into Ansel Adams works of art. I'm going to go through some of his darkroom techniques and translate them over to the world of PhotoPea. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to open up the photo that I want to work with. I've got it stored in my desktop. Got my digital photo B folder going here. I'm keeping everything organized. I've got Ansel in your hood, my fun name for our current project. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And I'm going to use this picture right here called Olive Tree. And this is just one that I snapped from my front yard. Okay. And if you take a look at this picture right here, just in the theme of things, Ansel Adams in our neighborhood, just went around and looked for interesting compositions. Want to have something that shows me sort of giving me some distance from a subject. I want to have some interesting information in the foreground of the picture, the midground of the picture, and then I've got kind of an interesting background in this picture. Okay. As a color picture, it's kind of plain, just a picture of the tree, but we're going to do a few treatments to it to kind of beef it up a little bit. So Ansel Adams' work is typically black and white. He's got a real high contrast, real sharp look. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to add an adjustment layer to it. I'm going to add the black and white adjustment layer. Okay, so you see right off the bat, this shifts over to black and white. Okay. This is different than just putting a filter on it, a black and white filter, because we actually get to adjust each one of the different colors and the amount of black or light, the value of each one of those colors in the shot. And you can go ahead and play with all these sliders yourself. One of the things that I do like to do, I do like to take cyan, which is kind of the sky blue, and I like to drop that down, which is going to give me that kind of Ansel Adams-esque darker sky. I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to drop that down a little bit, maybe not too much. I don't want to make it too crazy, but that is going to give me a little bit of separation between the sky here and the olive tree, which is going to be the interesting texture and pattern that I'm going to try and accentuate in the middle. Okay, so I can go ahead and close that up now. And so here you start seeing that we get a little bit more definition in here. One of the next things I'm going to do is I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and you can play with any of these: brightness, contrast, levels, curves, or exposure. Okay, but this is going to help me maybe beef up the contrast of this photo a little bit so I can make it a little bit more sharp, a little bit more interesting. I'm going to go ahead and play with curves. And when I look at the histogram for this photo, you can see that the deepest blacks are kind of non-existent in this shot. In this mid-range, we have quite a lot of blacks. And then over here, our whites are not too, I don't have a lot of those going on either. So what I might do is I might just slide this guy over a little bit so I can get a little bit more dramatic contrast, so I can get more of the pixels in my shot to be that deep, rich black. I'm going to go ahead and take the white. I'm going to slide that over here too, which is going to give me a lot more contrast. Okay. And then if I wanted to, like, I could pull this curve up and point it up towards that. I'm not quite sure if I like that. Maybe right in there is looking good. You're going to learn to play with these and move them around and see what kind of effect each of them have. So I'm pretty happy with this. I've got a lot higher contrast here. I haven't distorted it too much. I still think it's, kind of interesting. At this point, though, now I need to kind of separate some things a little bit. If you see these bushes in my foreground here down below, they're kind of bright and washed out. I've got these guys here that are bright and washed out. I've got the tree, which is interesting, but there's not a whole lot of separation between these. So that's where I'm going to start using the dodge and burn tools. So I'm going to go back to the photo itself. So I'm going to click on the layer that has a photo in it. And I want to show you how you can use these tools here. So it's going to be right here. This is the dodge tool. Click and hold. You've got dodge, you've got burn. Okay. With the dodge tool, I'm going to be able to lighten things up. Okay. So if I wanted to go in here, let's first, I probably should magnify this a little bit. I'm going to get a little closer. Okay, so if I wanted to work on this a little bit here, I could go ahead and use my dodge tool, and I'm going to go ahead and check my brush. I'm going to make sure that I have the softness really well, hardness down to like 0 on my brush. I can increase the size of it a little bit. And then if I want to, you see, I can go ahead and I can brush over this here and it should lighten it up a little bit. Okay, so if I wanted the tree to be a little less dark, I could just wash over this right here and I could brighten it up a little bit. Okay, another technique you could do, we could also use the dodge tool. So I can click in here, or sorry, the burn tool. So I can click on the burn tool here and I can go in, and again, I want to make the hardness of my brush really close to 0. Okay, I can choose what I want to do. I want to dodge the highlights or burn the highlights in. Okay, which means I'm going to take all these highlights in here, and as I paint over them, oops, no, let's back up. We want to go to the burn tool and let's go ahead and select highlights. Let's go ahead and select hardness down to 0. Let's make this brush a lot bigger. And now I can brush over this, and you see, as I go over these, I should, yeah, darken that up a little bit. Okay, so you can see in this area here, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of take away a little bit of the accentuation of it, because it's not going to be seen a little as much. We're going to darken it so it's less noticeable. Okay, so I'm going to go into this piece here. I'm going to darken that up and hopefully draw a little less attention to it. I can go over here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Same with this grass. I'm going to go in here and I want to darken these spots up a little bit more too. So I want to try and create a little bit more emphasis by having the brighter portions of the frame stand out a little bit more and this foreground element kind of drop off some. Okay, there we go. Now that's starting to work really well. I think it was lagging for a second. Okay, so I'm going to take away a little bit of the emphasis by dodging and burning here. Ansel Adams used to do this in the dark room. As he shined the light down on his photo paper, he would put different objects to either get rid of spots so that the light wasn't hitting the photo paper in that spot, or he would cover up most of the photo and he would turn the light back on in order to put more light against it, which would then turn the print darker. Okay, so as you kept light from getting on to the photo, which we call dodging, he would have less showing up, and as you put more light onto the photo, you would get a darker image. Okay, something that sometimes gets a little bit confusing, but the more light you put on photo paper, the darker it would get. Okay, so after I went in and I spent some time dodging and burning, trying to accentuate different things. Like for example, this area right here, I kind of like this area to be brighter. So I might go back in and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get my dodge tool and I'm gonna make sure that this section here is a little bit brighter because I feel like this little patch of flower bed kind of leads into the tree. So I think that makes it look a little bit more interesting. I can put a little bit here if I want to brighten up that area underneath. Okay. Um, Areas that I don't want to accentuate, like down here, again, like this pavement and the grass back here, I'm going to switch over to my burn tool and I'll go in there and I'm just going to kind of soften that up a little bit. Maybe go over it. That's going to darken it a little bit, which will accentuate my tree a little bit more. And go to the highlights. Maybe I also want to darken the midtones. And I can even go in and darken the shadows, which is going to create, a much, it's going to actually almost like hide that area there. Okay, so creating a little bit, maybe too much. Let's undo that. A couple of steps here. Good. So this is going to help accentuate this image in the middle here. Off to the left, I've got like the garage of my neighbor's house here. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of darken that up a little bit. Okay, so that it's a little less noticeable. Yeah, and so starting to look good. One of the last things I want to do to this is I want to go ahead and I want to use, let's see, this, nope. I want to use this tool here. So it looks like a drop, and the drop has the blur tool. So if we wanted to make something kind of soft and romantic looking, we could use the blur tool, but we're going to actually use the sharpness tool. Okay, the sharpen tool is going to allow me to use my brush. Okay, strengthening. Let's go ahead and do this up to like, I'm going to get into like 77% right here. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and now I can take the areas of the frame that I want to sharpen up, and I can go ahead and run the brush over the top of that. Okay, and you got to play with this a bit to get the right blend, because sometimes it can be a little bit too sharp. But you see, if I just kind of work this back and forth over the top of this olive tree and its leaves, it's going to make some more emphasis on it by making those lines and those shapes and all those repetitive elements of the leaves stand out a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just brushing over the top of this and gonna work it all the way through, just to accentuate the crispness that Ansel Adams is known for. Sharp focus was one of the things that Ansel Adams' work was really appreciated for by a lot of the people who saw it, and that's what kind of creates that feeling of almost having a three-dimensional portrait when you look at it. Okay, because things can really stand out. I'm also going to go back down, and even though I've darkened these a little bit, I'm going to go over them. So I'm going to sharpen them a little bit, because you notice as I darken them, I kind of lost a little bit of the detail. So I can go back in and I'll sharpen these up, kind of layering over the top of the different effects that I did. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. I'm gonna put this in here, let's sharpen up these blades of grass, because the goal is not to hide them. We're not trying to do the portrait effect like we might see with a shallow depth of field. We still want things to stand out. We want them to be really crisp and interesting looking, but we do want to try and create some emphasis through the way that we're going to mix our different elements of foreground, midground, and background together. Finally, I'm going to go over my clouds a little bit with the sharpness tool and see if I can't make them stand out in the sky a little bit more. Let's go down to this guy here. If you want to, you could also use um, your dodge tool if you want to kind of brighten up the clouds. I don't think it clicked over. So I'm going to use the dodge tool here. Going to get the highlights and see I can go ahead and make my clouds kind of stand out a little bit more. All right, by brightening them up a little bit. And there. Yeah. I don't want to do too much of that. I think I'm going to back that up, because it looks like I took away a little bit of the detail that I like in the clouds. So maybe instead of using the highlights on this, I might want to use the midtones. There we go. Just to make them stand out a little bit more. I think I get a little bit, few more pixels out of that. So there we go. So that's looking pretty interesting now. Okay, so I've created a much more dynamic black and white presentation, similar to some of the stuff that we did in the Platon portraits. Okay, and yeah, so I hope this helps. I hope you guys have some fun kind of playing with the adjustment layers, black and white, playing with the curves to try and create that deep tonal range that Ansel Adams' work is known for, and then go into the different spots of your photo, use the dodge tool and the burn tool to try and make things stand out more, or to push them back a little bit so that you can have the things that you really want the audience's eye to be drawn to stand out. And then finally, make sure you use the sharpen tool. You go over that and you'll sharpen those parts of your photo that you want to really kind of pop out. When you're all done, the file menu, don't forget to save it as a PSD file. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and download it in case you end up looking at it and you're not extremely happy with the way it turned out. And then you can adjust it, and then if you are finished adjusting it and you're ready to turn it in, make sure you export that as a JPEG file. Give it a proper file name, save it. I'm going to bump the quality up here so I can get it high to get my pixels as sharp as possible. And that part's kind of frozen on me. See, there it goes. kind of lagging right now, and then I'm going to go ahead and click save. At least I'm going to try and click save. It seems like I'm having some network issues right now, just like you do at home sometimes. Anyway, all right. Well, if you guys want any extra support on that, make sure you connect with either Mr. Roper or I through Google Hangouts, and we can show you some more. All right, take care.